Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock, Friday the 15th, and this is day 2 of the 2-day seminar, Party Wall Act, Brick by Brick. My name's Dil of Brick. I'm the Party Wall guy, and I'm joined by Paul Smith here, very kindly joined up with us to do this webinar on the Party Wall Act. Paul's from Foundations, introduction in a minute. So just go through a little bit of housekeeping. This is a Zoom webinar. It's not a Zoom call, so there's a few differences. It'll be just so that we can get through it quicker. You're all muted at the moment. Paul will be watching for the questions. And let me just make sure that you can all see there. Don't forget to do this. I've actually got 2 screens, so I'm going to try and stay focused. So it's a Zoom webinar. Keep your questions coming in. We've muted everybody. It's slightly different from a standard Zoom meeting. Okay, no scheduled fire alarm. So if we get a fire alarm, it's a real thing. My fire exit's over here. Please make sure you know where yours are. I'm sure you know where your bathrooms and tea making facilities are. I can't help you with that. Normally would say the restrooms are there or the coffee guy places are there, but anyway. Just quickly go through on the phone. If you're watching this on a phone, you'll have various options. There'll be question and answers, hands up and mic, and if you can stay muted, that's just a little screen of the phone. If you do get an incoming call on your phone, and once your call's finished, when you rejoin the webinar, you might find that you won't be able to hear me. So what you may have to do is come out and go back into the webinar, and that will reconnect your audio. Please mute while we're in the meeting, just stop background noise going on. I think you guys are quite good at that so far. Should we lose internet connection, and we've lost it once, we have got a backup internet. Just wait for us there. We'll reconnect. It'll take about a minute or so, and if the backup goes down, then we've got some real big problems. Again, if your Wi-Fi disconnects, just wait, and your Zoom should automatically reconnect you and put you back on. Been asked for recording, so we've got a little YouTube channel. It's called 1996 Party Wall. Recordings will go on there in about a week or so, and Paul will also make them available on his website. It'll take about a week or so to get them there. We just want to tidy those up. You might come across my book on Amazon. Please don't buy it. We're doing an update on it, so save your money. We're doing an update, so and also these webinars should give you even more information. Don't buy the book. Yes, it's day 2, so I've got a little gift for you. I'm quite excited about that. You'll have to wait till the end to get that. Question and answer. So on at the bottom somewhere you'll see a question and answer section. So keep your question and answers coming in. I'm just going to do a little test on the hand raising function. So quick show of hands, those of you that have come across the Party Wall Act in some sort of form or shape. Fantastic. And raise your hands if you haven't come across it. And finally, raise your hands if you're not going to partake, whatever, regardless of whatever I say. Sorry, that joke obviously works better in real life presentations. So just to talk to our sponsors, Paul, thank you very much for kindly putting this on with us. It's a pleasure, and there's Paul's details. And towards the end, I'll bring Paul on with the question and answers. So let's get going. I understand I don't want to be time critical on this because it is Friday afternoon after all, and we'd all like to get the weekend going.
Difficult to tell these days, isn't it, if it's Friday afternoon or not?
Yeah, they all seem the same at the moment. So yes, you're totally right. You know, it all sort of splits up into sunny, hot, nice days when you want to stay in the garden, work from the garden, or not so hot days. But
yeah, Playing
let,
at the moment, so we'll crack on.
let's make the most of it while we can. And I realize it's quite a lovely day outside. So once again, thank you for taking the time and being here. So this is day two. It's due to last about 90 minutes or so. And we're going to go through section 2-3 notices, and these affect loft conversions and chimney removals. A little section on porches. Porches can be interesting. I had a question this morning about what happens when notices don't get replied to. So I'm going to cover that under non-reply to notices. We also had a question about third surveyors, so I should be covering that as well. And quite interesting is surveyors' costs. So I'm going to go through that. I've got a little section on architects. So this is sort of how architects can help improve the process and help everybody deliver better results in terms of party wall issues. We're going to have a question and answer session. Just a quick recap for day one. On day one, it seems like ages ago, it was just Tuesday. We covered how, in terms of the building owner's perspective, we also did a process overview of how the process works. The common types of building works, and we're trying to relate the common types of building works with the sections set out in the Party Wall Act and trying to mesh the two together. We also looked at section 6 notices, and I'm guessing for most of the audience, this is the most relevant and interesting element, and because it mainly concerns rear extensions, rear and side extensions. Also, section 1 is quite important. I'm going to do a little recap in a minute, and the options for adjoining owners' responses. We had quite an interesting little question and answer session, and hopefully today we'll get more value, and then you'll be able to ask more questions as we go along. So, quick reminder why I undertake the party wall process. So the first reason is it's a twofold law. It's there for two reasons. One of the reasons is it protects building owners, those parties doing works to their property, to protect them from false and malicious claims. And the way that's done is a schedule of conditions from the neighbouring property, very similar to when we rent a car. They'll take photographs of the car just to be able to prove that the scratches and dents were either already there or they've taken place because of the works being done. Similar concept to that. And this can become quite a serious issue if we don't take the party wall process. The works can be stopped midstream, while the party wall process is sorted out, or when legal action gets involved. So it can be stopped midstream, and that's not a good situation to be in. Please sort it out before the project actually begins. Legally, it's the building owner's responsibility, not the architects, not the builders, not the project manager. So it's one of these laws that are quite strict in terms of very similar to health and safety. You can't say, I didn't know about it, or the architect or the project manager or the builder didn't tell me. So that doesn't really work with judges. And once again, prevent legal action. And with legal action, you can also be responsible for the legal costs involved. So it's always better to deal with things in a proper and reasonable manner beforehand, especially where you've got projects that have the time facility in there, and much better to deal with issues beforehand rather than let them escalate. And most importantly of all, it is the law, and ignorance of the law is not a defense, as we all know. So I'm just going to quickly recap the focus group. So we've got building owners. Now, these are the owners that own their own home and their own homes being extended. And I'm guessing a large part of the audience works on other people's homes, whereby they're having to have some sort of adaptations, extensions built to facilitate their changing needs. The other classification we always get is property developers, and this could be where you've got local authority, anybody just refurbing a house or adding space to add value, and it also extends into commercial developments throughout England and Wales. There's actually very few exemptions under the Act. This can also affect where we've got bridging finance and development finance going on. It can affect the finance facilities on there. Now, for the audience on this afternoon, I'm guessing a large part of the audience involves local authority, property managers. I put in the investors because that's the other group that always get involved. So if you're managing a portfolio for a local authority, you need to be aware of the Party Wall Act on the adjoining owner side, in that it can affect your property, and the folks next door might be decent and very good people who are just trying to do their own extension. But where they're sending a notice and you're missing an opportunity to not carry out a schedule of condition, it's affecting your housing stock if you're a property manager. And once again, I'm going to put this as a key. It's the architects. I would say probably architects stroke project managers who need to understand this. And a lot of the times they're the first port of call that need to raise this act to the other stakeholders involved, saying we need to deal with this in a timely manner. So the basic terms, we have the building owner. Now this is the owner of the building. So if you're taking the project on behalf of the building owner or even tenants, it is the building owner that's responsible for issuing the notices. You always only have one building owner, and on the other side you can have multiple classes of adjoining owners. Where you've got terrace properties or properties in closed facilities, you can have multiple freeholders. Although there's only one freeholder per property, it can be a scenario that multiple properties are involved. You can also have multiple leaseholders, and each property can have freeholder and leaseholder. Now, clear definition on leaseholder, this is leaseholders of more than 1 year. And there is a little black hole, if you like, in terms of leaseholders between 1 and 7 years that are not registered on the land registry. And because all the adjoining owners' details are extracted from the land registry, this group can be missed out. And with social housing, it's quite important to be aware, because sometimes you've got leases from private sector tenants that are more than 1 year, and you're responsible for maintaining the property and giving it back in a certain state. The fourth group, the third group is rights to receive profits. These can be people who are into either trusts or they've done a deal where they have a right to receive profit from land. It doesn't usually apply to social housing, but it can apply in other areas. And most important of all, and this is, I've had a question on this, it's where you're contracted to buy land. So if an owner next door has exchanged, or you've exchanged, you become a notifiable owner under the Act. So you should receive the notice, because once the old owners disappear, it is your property. So that once you've exchanged, you're a notifiable owner in that you should be notified under the Act. It's quite important to be aware of this, because as you issue a notice, houses, properties next door can be exchanging or being sold. So it could be that you're having to deal with this class as an adjoining owner. The group that aren't notifiable as adjoining owners are short-hold tenants, council tenants, and mortgage companies. Just a quick run through of the party wall process. So stage one is where the building owner issues notices. This is not a party wall agreement. It's done in writing and served by post. Stage two is decided by the adjoining owners. Now they can opt for a schedule of condition, which is again largely photographic survey. Its idea is to protect the building owner from false and malicious claims. They can also ask for an award. Now, award is what we could term as a party wall agreement, sets out legal rights. It's a legal document with both parties, sets out rights and responsibilities and procedures if there is any damage. So quick look at building owners' perspective. Now, the Party Wall Act is actually written in terms of sections, and it talks about foundations and walls, but it's not actually written in terms of rear extensions, rear extensions, lofts, taking chimneys out, doing basements and porches. So I put together this little table which translates the type of work, section numbers you get involved. I've also put in there the notice period required, because that's quite useful to give you a heads up in terms of the time scaling and managing your project. There's also a fourth column in there which goes through automatic consent on dissent, and that's quite important because that's one of the major changes between the 1939 Act and the 96 Act, sorry. So the major change was when you issued a notice, if you don't get a reply, apart from section 1, all the other notices, it's automatic dissent. So therefore you have to go through another process, and I'm going to go through that this afternoon. So let's have a quick look through lofts section 2 and 3, and the works are done under section 2, but the notice is issued is a section 3 notice. So that's why I talk about section 2 and 3, because it's virtually the same. We talk about loft conversions and chimney breast removal. Now, let's have a look at this scenario where we're doing, these are the common factors that involve a loft conversion. So let's pretend this is a house on the right. They're going to carry out a loft conversion. There's my loft conversion. So most loft conversions involve, sorry, I've lost something. I'm just monitoring this. Most loft conversions involve insertion of steel into the party wall to create a separation so that you can achieve soundproofing regulations. So that's a section 2.3 notice. It's 2.2F actually, insert cutting pockets into the wall to insert steels. It's a 2-month notice period, but this can be decreased if the adjoining owner agrees and you get either an award in place or they consent with a schedule of condition. A 2-month period is a good period to have in your mind as a heads up in terms of the minimum, and then if it can be decreased, that's a win for both sides. So the other thing that gets involved in, and people misunderstand that, is you're going to cut into this little element over here, which is called to insert flashing, to make sure that the party wall is waterproofed, both for your benefit as a party having the lofts done, and also for the adjoining owner, in that you want waterproofing on the party wall because any leaks into your property are going to affect their property and vice versa. So that should be put into the notice. Again, it goes with the insertion of steel's notice, and it's a 2-month period. And overall, when all these notices are wrapped up into an award or an agreement, they're all worked on together. Another common factor is sometimes you need removal of old plaster, and what you're actually doing is cutting away from the party wall. There's debate in the industry whether that's a notifiable works or not, and it depends on how thick your wall is and the effect on next door's property, and it could be de minimis. But if you're giving a notice for inserting steels, you might as well do this as well, because it protects you in terms of having to stop works should be required. Again, it's a subsection 2K. 2-month notice period, and the previous remarks in terms of being able to shorten it also apply. Now, when you're doing a loft, you'll end up removing the roof. So there's my version of removing the roof. Obviously, you take away the chimney that's not adjoining to the party wall before, but this can leave the party wall exposed, and what you should do is temporarily cover it, cover it with a tin hat if you like. And this has several effects. In terms of building works, it stops the party wall from absorbing water, which is going to cause you problems later on, and also stops damp seeping into the next door property. So you need to be mindful of that. Again, it comes under the 2.2, this is a 2.2N section, but it comes under the same regime. Now, you could also end up doing garages conversions where you're removing the party wall that was previously enclosed, and it could be you're leaving it exposed because your build is different. So this is a notice that's useful for that. I'm going to go through slightly touch upon an example where you're converting a garage of a building owner that was previously attached into something different. So you need to be mindful of this, and this section applies to that scenario as well. It's not just written for lofts. Occasionally we come across raising the party wall. So let me just reiterate. So you imagine a house, the party wall is under the roof line, and to form the cheek, there we go, the party wall gets raised. I'm going to try this little gadget again, see if I can bring some annotation to it. So that's our party wall previously. And if we decide to raise it, what you're doing is you're actually forming the side of the dormer cheek by a brick wall, which is actually better for both neighbors. It gives you a better loft, gives you slightly more space, and that's notifiable works. And you have the right to raise the full party wall, regardless of whether your neighbor gives you consent or not. It's notifiable under 22L. Again, 2-month notice regime can be decreased by the adjoining owners. Now, sometimes the adjoining owners think they can stop you doing it. Actually, they can't, because it's one of the rights you have under the Party Wall Act. They actually shouldn't, because it's a better result for them as well. You're allowed to do so by law, but sometimes planners object to this because it's the old thing of curtilage. They believe legal boundary, which runs in the middle of a party wall usually, is where your property stops. It's actually curtilage, which means the end of the party wall. So you're allowed to do so by law. Sometimes planning guys don't always understand this. Building owners can appeal this, but the problem they have is because they're in such a hurry to build it, they may not have time to appeal it. So you end up with a scenario, although this gives you a better finish and better result all round, you're having to build away from the party wall. So where you're raising the party wall, section 1111 comes in again here. So that where the first owners raise the party wall, when the second owner builds their loft, they are allowed to do so, and they're allowed to enclose on that party wall, but they'll have to make use of cost to the next door neighbor. It should be paid at the time of usage, not at the time of building. So that's something to be aware of. And the costs are worked out at as if the costs were incurred at the time of enclosure. So if it's 10, 20 years later and this owner's using the raised party wall, the costs are calculated at that point of time. So I'm going to quickly go through chimney breast removal, because I think this is more relevant for the audience here. So that's your house. That's the neighbor's house. They've got a little chimney breast. Now, chimney breast is under the element under the roof line. That's the element you want to take out. And there's your party wall. So it's notifiable under 22G. Again, it's actually applies to any projecting bit of projection from the party wall. So you can do footings and chimney breasts and so forth. 2-month notice period. And overall, chimney breast removal are one of the most riskiest parts of works you can do to a party wall. Apart from basement, they're most risky part of undertaking work. So this is the one to really watch out for. And whatever you do, please don't use percussion tools. Either use hand tools or rotary power tools. I'm just going to go through quickly on porches, because this is quite an interesting one, and sometimes you may need to build a porch. And this scenario doesn't always happen. So, sorry, that's your house. That's the one next door. You've got the other one next door, and there's your little porch that you're building. And I know there's regulations now. It's got to be 3 square meters and less than 4 meters in height. I actually remember the time before they put that regulation in. So it's within 3 meters of the neighboring property. And this is a scenario where you've got terrace house of Victorian property, so their foundations aren't very deep. Porches, you can get away with porches having very shallow foundations, but I'm assuming here that they're having notifiable foundations under section 6.1. So it's within 3 meters of that. And if the house is not very wide, you can be within 3 meters of the other property, so they could also be notifiable. And again, because it's a party wall, you could be building on the line of junction, which is here. it's also notifiable under section 1. So basements, quick run through basements. Section 6.1 and 6.2 are notified. Basements can be notified under section 6.1 and section 2 because you're doing excavation. Where you end up pinning the party wall, you've got a section 2.3 notice as well. You might be cutting off projections, so you could have corbel foundations that you need to cut off and straighten out. So there's a section 2 notice. You could also be inserting steels to support the previous house and arrange support the existing house and to make arrangements in terms of how you're holding the structure up. So that's insertion of steels. There's also a section 1 notice where you could be building down on the line of junction, and you can also get special foundations. Now, special foundations are an element that's left over from the previous Act 1939 in terms of definition of special foundations are foundations that have steel rods and beams inserted into them. You do need written permission before you can put special foundations into below the neighbor's property. It's actually a relic from the old Act. There is advantage in having special foundations in that it allows you to build thinner walls, have bigger floor area, and gives you greater load bearing capacity. But the adjoining owner needs to provide written consent for it. And if they're upset at you doing a foundation basement, they may not give this written consent. And where you've got the 10-4 process, which I'm going to talk about today, I think, I haven't addressed it yet. So where you've got appointment under section 10.4b, the surveyor appointed on behalf of the adjoining owners can't give that written consent for special foundations. Oh, right. So 10.4 process. Let's go look at this. So where you've issued party wall notices and you receive no response, what do? And this is one of the major changes from the old 39 Act to the 96 Act. So you issue a notice. Now most notices that aren't automatically consenting, so section 6 and section 2, that's a 14-day notice period. And the reason it says 16 days, you have to allow for 2 days for deemed service via post. So if you hand your notices to the next door neighbor, make sure you also post out a copy and obtain a certificate of posting. Under the Deemed Service Act, the certificate of posting constitutes service, regardless of whether they receive it or not. And don't do recorded delivery, because if they don't sign for something on recorded delivery, it means they've rejected it. It doesn't constitute service. So although the Act will say 14 days, you have to count 16 days. The calendar days, not working days. That's the other thing to be aware of. So you've received no confirmation. In that case, you issue it's called a 10.4 letter. It's actually a 10.4 reminder letter stroke notice. Again, you post that out. That's a 10-day letter. I've got 14. It should be actually 10 plus 2, which should give you 28 days. I think I was counting a weekend here. So 10 days after this letter, if nothing's happened, you have to appoint a surveyor on their behalf. Now, once you appoint a surveyor on their behalf, it's got to be a different surveyor, not yourself. So you can't become an agreed surveyor. You've got to appoint someone else. And this surveyor will normally write to them, give them 7 to 10 days to give access for schedule of condition. If there's no access granted, then awards are served, and in the award it will state access was requested, no access has been granted, therefore works can continue, and you're covered under the Party Wall Act. Now, it's quite important, if you do not undertake the 10.4 process, you're leaving yourself, joining owners has had a problem in that sometimes they don't participate. They believe by not replying, they could frustrate the process. The neighbour's works can't continue. That's not true. All they're doing is they've had no opportunity to have a survey of their property done. And when if there's a claim for damages, it doesn't put it in good light in that it can be argued. It might be argued that the damage was already there, or if it's not clear whether the condition of the property, it doesn't do the adjoining owner any favors. On the other side, the building owner might have their work stopped, so it's important for building owners to carry out the 10-4 process and to make sure that they're covered, and so that their works can't stop in midstream and projects be frustrated while builders are on site, and that adds to even more expense where builders are on site, they can't get on with their works and they're having to incur expense. So let's move on to the third surveyor. Now, under the, I'm just going to look around on my screen actually. Okay, so under the adjoining owner option, one of the options they have is to appoint their own surveyor. So a building owner appoints their own surveyor and an adjoining owner appoints their own surveyor. So you've got two surveyors involved here. One of the first things both surveyors should do is appoint a third surveyor. Now, third surveyor is someone, and I think the term is they have to form a quorum, in that if the building owner surveyor and the adjoining owner surveyor don't agree on a point, they can raise it to the third surveyor. Or if one of the surveyors becomes incapable, dies, or can't deal with the issue, then the third surveyor can step in and take their place. In most cases, the third surveyor is usually a silent, stands by silently while the process continues, and 99% of the cases go ahead and no need for the third surveyor to be involved. So in this scenario, we'll have the adjoining owner who deals with the adjoining owner, the adjoining owner surveyor deals with the adjoining owner, organizes appointment for a schedule of condition, coordinates with the building owner surveyor, and they carry out a schedule of condition. The building owner then drafts a schedule of condition report, also drafts a draft party wall award, sending it over to the adjoining owner surveyor to go through and give their comments on that. So let's have a look at the third surveyor. Well, one of the first duties each of the surveyors has is to appoint when there's two surveyors involved. If you've got an agreed surveyor, there's no third surveyor involved. There's no appointment to a third surveyor. Where you've got a building owner surveyor and an adjoining owner surveyor, they must appoint a third surveyor before they do anything else. And it can get missed, but it must be done. A third surveyor is actually selected, is the correct term, not appointed. And it must be done in writing. So it can be done in email nowadays. It used to be done in letter form previously. You should actually ask your surveyor who the third surveyor is if you haven't already been informed. So who can refer matters to the third surveyor? So it's either of the surveyors, so the building owner surveyor or the adjoining owner surveyor, or the building owner or the adjoining owner. All these four parties can approach the third surveyor, and they're the only ones that are allowed to approach the third surveyor if they're having problems or any issues. So where you've got a project and you feel your surveyor's either doing the wrong thing or not doing it properly or taking too long, you can approach the third surveyor for advice and see if he can help you. That's quite important to understand. Now, the other question I get asked quite frequently is, okay, you've got three surveyors. You started with one, the adjoining owner surveyors appointed their surveyor. Now you've ended up with three, that's three lots of costs. That's not actually true. The third surveyor's costs are only incurred if they become involved. And as previously said, in most scenarios, the third surveyor sits dormantly and has no need to become involved. And sorry, I've gone through already who can approach the third surveyor. Now, the other thing to understand about the third surveyor's costs, it's not necessarily always the case that the building owner side pays the third surveyor's costs. If they're approached on an issue and the third surveyor decides that the building owner surveyor is right and it's the adjoining owner surveyor that's wrong, costs can be awarded against the adjoining owner. It's not awarded against the cost, it's done by award, and it can be appointed against the adjoining owner. So that's something critical and needs to be aware of. So this is, I guess, one of my favorite questions here, in that who pays the surveyor's costs, and this is, as I say, the $64,000 question, in that who's going to pay their costs. There's a very common myth that the building owner always pays the surveyor's costs. That's not actually true. So the convention followed in deciding who pays the costs are who benefits from the works. Under Section 10, Resolution of Disputes, Section 1012C, it comes under any other matters rising out of or incidental to the dispute, including the costs of making the award. So here we've got a scenario of where, in other words, it's the surveyors that are deciding who pays the cost. Now, they do follow a convention that's known in the industry, and I'm guessing a lot of building owners and adjoining owners aren't aware of this. And indeed, I was speaking to a building owner on Tuesday, in fact, and they were unaware that they'd have to end up paying the cost because of the type of project. So let's have a look at how is this decided. So it's first rear extension. So who's benefiting from a rear extension? It's the owners doing the work. They're going to get the increase in space. They're going to get the increase in utility. And I realize sometimes it's necessary for them to do an extension, but it's purely down to the benefit gained by the type of works. So for a rear extension, it's the building owner. For a loft conversion, again, they're getting the utility, they're getting the increase in space, they're getting all the benefits. So they end up paying all the costs. When we're removing chimneys in terms of chimney breasts, again, it's all the benefits are accruing to the building owners. So therefore, all the surveyor's costs and fees are incurred by the building owners. So let's have another look at the scenario whereby, say there's repairs to a party structure. Now, common type of this is where you've got a chimney stack. So you've got a chimney above the roof line. The chimney element above the roof line is called the chimney stack, and it's fallen into disrepair. No one's looked at it. One of the neighbors are doing a loft, but they find that the chimney stack needs to be repointed, repaired. In this scenario, all the benefits are shared, so therefore all the costs and surveyor's fees need to be apportioned between the owners. And I've seen it where we've got one house, two flats, on a house that's been converted into two flats. So you've got a scenario where there's three owners that are benefiting from the repair of this chimney stack structure. So the cost of the repairs, the surveyors, and everything else are included in that project, and they're apportioned. So the old myth about it's always the building owner that pays, that's not actually true. It's actually a little bit false. Don't be fooled. But with most projects, it's quite clear that the building owner is benefiting, or they're doing a commonly they're repairing a common structure. Now, the other thing to be aware of who benefits from the works, where you're appointing, you issue a notice to the adjoining owner, they don't respond, you carry out the tenfold process, you appoint a surveyor on their behalf, and the adjoining owner surveyor who's been appointed under Section 10(4)B can issue an award saying the adjoining owners have a poor proportionment to cost. So that's how that works. This can also occur where you've got retaining walls. So you can have a retaining wall in the garden, and the building owner issues the notices, therefore no response. They have to then carry out a tenfold process, and you could get a scenario where the adjoining owner has some costs, and of course included in the cost would be the surveyor's costs. So you need to be aware of that, and it's quite difficult in bigger organizations where the notices can get lost and no action been taken. So I'm gonna discuss here architects. So Architects are an integral part of the process in that everything's designed, carefully looked at. And this is where I think there's big benefits to be gained by architects understanding the process and improving how party walls are dealt with. So from our experience, and this isn't having a go at anybody at all, and it's just designed to improve the process if we can. We generally find three types of architects. There are those guys that will bury their head in sand, put a note in the building control and saying party wall notices must be issued by the owners, and just leave it at that, ship the project out, and that's the end of it. So effectively they're burying their head in sand and not giving the client a heads up. In the middle, we get the architects that are trying to be really helpful, and what these guys do is they'll draft a notice and they'll give it to the building owner, and the scenario you're getting is they're asking the building owner to serve the notice. When the building owner receives the notice, they're saying, what do I do with this? How do I serve this? And it's a little bit like someone being asked to throw an axe at somebody else. They've got no idea what to do. They don't know. They're not aware of the tenfold process, and it can actually end up landing the clients in more problems than if they'd done nothing. So it's probably better not to be half-hearted and helpful. Now, on the other extreme, you've got guys, architects sometimes, who carry out the party wall process. But we can help those guys as well in terms of improving the tenfold process and getting it done and getting things done properly. So there's three extremes of architects. Now, from our experience, we've noticed 7 improvements that the architects can make, and it'll help the process. So first thing they can do is to tell the client or the person they're designing the project for as early as possible. You need to deal with the party wall process. Get it done early. Don't, increasingly, you're not able to duck it. Now, the Act is 21, or I think it's 21 years old, roughly, if my maths is right, 97. Sorry, it could be 24, so the math, I'm a little bit in history. So everyone's becoming more and more aware of the Act. You can't hide from it. You need to deal with it. And it's one of those things that can be dealt with up front. So therefore, there's no issues involved. You should tell your client, and the best way to do it is to do it in an email so that they can't come back and say, you didn't tell us this. And this is the #1 excuse we hear from building owners: nobody told me about this. Second improvement they can make is the adjoining owner's details, they'll usually just put their address on and put it in the post, or say hand it to them. They don't actually search for the adjoining owner's details in the land registry. So the details for the adjoining owner should be searched from the land registry, and those are the details you need to put on there, and that's where you need to serve the notice. That's one of the errors that are being made commonly, and one of the reasons is a red book that I'll go through in a minute as well. So the other thing, as I mentioned before, they're drafting the notices and saying to their clients, well, you need to deal with this, here's the notices, and that's it. And in their mind, they're actually trying to be helpful. They're trying to do something for the client to move them on. But what they're actually doing is causing them to be in a worse position than before. So they should either do the process completely end to end or don't get involved. And as I said previously, because you have to do a 10-4 process, you should send the notices as well as handing them to your neighbors via post, so that you've got it documented. You're ready for the next stage in terms of sending the 10-4 reminder letter. Don't draft notices and give it to them. It doesn't help them. And a lot of the process is getting them to understand. So therefore, again, I'm coming back to the 10-4 process, whereby if you haven't served the notices in the first place and you can't prove that you've served them, you can't do the second stage, which is the 10-4 process, and you can't follow a 10-4 reminder letter. You can't follow it all the way through, and that's still leaving the building owner open for not closing the process up properly and not following the process. And it's leaving the building owner open to having the work stopped. Again, complete the process. So appoint the other surveyor, or go through the award. And often I get calls from architects saying, we've done X, Y, Z, we've appointed a third surveyor, or they haven't appointed a third surveyor. And they're a little bit bamboozled and they don't understand the workings of the act, so that they're actually missing out and sometimes getting lost, and they haven't got anybody to refer to because they haven't got the backup as most surveyors do. So if you're going to take the process, make sure you've got appropriate backup. Number one gripe and number one thing I keep hearing, they're sending notices by recorded delivery. It's quite easy to do because, I shouldn't really say this, the post office chap might be listening as well. When you go to the post office, the post office guys are trying to be helpful. And you ask for a certificate of posting, so they're saying, it's an important document, you should send it recorded delivery. No, please don't do that. Don't send it recorded delivery, because when they get this little ticket coming through the post, usually no one's there to sign. They get a little red ticket. They either don't bother going to the post office, or it's delayed, or if you're anything like me, you're saying it's probably a request for money. I'm going to ignore it for a couple of weeks. That doesn't constitute service because they haven't actually accepted it. Whereas if you did a certificate of posting, it drops through once it gets into the Royal Mail system, that constitutes service in 2 days' time. And there's my point back on, keep a log of certificate of posting. You in fact should scan and keep it, because if it ever goes to court, you need certificate of posting for the notice, you need certificate of posting for the 10-4 letter, so that when you've made a 10-4 appointment, you need to have the paperwork to back it up with. And when the barristers see this, they'll usually step back from challenging it because you followed the correct process. And indeed, I've had it where I've sent the notices, no reply. And part of the reason is that the building owners haven't changed their address of service. They've suddenly woken up when there's scaffolding going on and they've said, where's my party wall award? You haven't issued me a notice. You haven't followed the process. And usually they're being egged on, so that you need to have your paperwork complete in this respect. So the other thing that's helpful here is how the process is looked at. So usually what we find is the building owners are running through the application process, putting the application in, might be under PD, might be a planning application, and they're waiting for the planning application to come through before they start the party wall process. And as you've seen under section 2 notices, that's 2-month notice. Section 1's a 1-month notice, and it can take longer to deal with the award and to go through the 10-4 process. It was about 45 days or something. So in this scenario, what's actually happening is you're waiting for the planning. So you're waiting 8 weeks usually to get a response. And it could be another 2 months before you're able to start works. So how can we improve that process? Now, this is particularly relevant to PED stuff because you know you're going to get planning. You've just put the notices, planning applications in. If you don't get the full planning, you're going to get some sort of planning or other. If you don't get the 6 or 8 meter, you're going to get 3 meter. So you might as well issue the notices. The improvement on the process would be to create a first draft, put the application in, and while the application, create the first draft, and even before the application goes in, you can start the party wall process. So you can finalize, you know, all the intricate bits in terms of where you're putting the bathroom, the design, or how you need the adaptations done. The important section for us as party wall surveyors is what excavations you're doing, what you're doing to the party wall, roughly what the project is. Given all of those, and as long as we have a first draft of the drawings, a section showing the excavation, the position of it, and a site map, we can then issue the notice under section 6. So what's happening in that scenario is the party wall process is running. You can put your planning application in, and if it usually where it's under PD, you know it's going to go through. So we can finish the party wall process in time for the build to start. So we're doing quite well for time today, actually. Sorry, Paul, are you still there?
Yes, got a few questions for you if you want to load those now.
Great. Let me just go through this and then
Okay.
we'll quiet. Sorry, I thought I lost you because I've been nothing. I've just been rattling on, going on. So, quick gift. So, you'll find this booklet on the internet. This is written by the government department. In fact, one of my mentors took part in the committee that wrote this. This was written in 2002. It was when initially the Party Wall Act came out. It's actually a very good book. It explains a lot of things in very good detail. And when you get it, you'll see some of my diagrams are borrowed from this book. So, and they've done it really well. But the bit this falls down on is how you serve a notice to do the certificate of posting and the 10-4 process. So what's happening a lot is they're reading, so, you know, everyone's on the internet. As soon as they get told by a party wall, like, yeah, we'll have a look. This booklet pops up, they'll download it. It's about 46 pages. It's got some templates in there and they'll follow there. And one of the things it doesn't describe is certificate of posting, how you serve notices, and there's no process for 10-4. And I'm guessing that they assume most stuff will, you know, I've got to be careful how they say this, that they're assuming that neighbors are really pally with each other. It's all going to go tickety-boo and everyone's going to sign off for it and we're all going to be happy. And there's no need for serving notices and doing 10-4. And it hasn't quite worked out that way. They haven't revised it just yet. So what we've done is, this is our little gift to everyone. And if you link with me on LinkedIn, and I've just done a revision on this on the last, I think it's Wednesday or Thursday, I've added some extra notes in there. This is a basic PDF, which sets out, if you look at this is a step-by-step process. So assess the notifiable works, you look up the adjoining owners. So the idea is you tick one of those boxes every time you go through it. It's got a template for most of the simple works. So for what are we covering there? Rear extensions, lofts, probably not porches, they're quite simple, and removing a chimney breast. So we go through those and you'll see some of the slides in there on the new updated version. So connect with me on LinkedIn, get this, it's actually one of my posts that I posted. I couldn't work out how to do it in an article, so I did it as a post. One day I'll work out how to put a PDF on an article and do that as well. So take a look at that, link with me, connect with me on LinkedIn, go and grab that. If you use this in conjunction with the Red Book, that should help you understanding much better. And it's got some of the reasons why notices don't get consented to. So I've done quite well today. Hopefully I haven't gone too fast. Paul, if you'd like to take over, give me some questions and a little bit of introduction of how you can help people in terms of carrying out the works of whatever they do.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say on the Red Book, I think they've redone it as it's now kind of fairly plain and white after they rebranded all the government documentation. So it's still on the .gov website, but it does look a little bit differently now. It's still got the same content, but
I'll have to have a look at the new version because you know, I'm a little bit behind on that. So
I think the content's exactly the same. They've just
great.
rebranded it slightly differently.
So someone's charging them an enormous amount to make the red into white.
I don't think they spent a lot of money on it. To be honest,
just refreshed it. Yeah, no, that's good.
Yes. Yes. So I mean, I guess in terms of resources, if you're after a range of resources, particularly on adaptations, then there's some on the Foundation's website. And there's a kind of small section on party wall stuff, but obviously go to Dil's LinkedIn site for far more detail than we've got. There were a few questions, if I just run through on the in the Q&A session.
Yeah, actually, before you start the questions, I've got a little couple of slides on the questions I was picking up on Tuesday.
Okay.
So if I run through those first, perhaps some of those get answered, and then
Yep.
we can go through all the leftover ones. Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to go through Section 6 notices and rare extensions again, because I'm guessing a feeling this is one of the major,
Yes.
most of the common works that your guys are doing.
Yeah, quite often, yes.
Yeah. So just to refresh your memory, Section 6.1, 2 tests. It's first test is it's got to be within 3 meters of a horizontal distance, and please note here it says any part. And the second test is the excavation's got to be a lower horizontal level, and I've underlined any part because that's the bit that you have to sort of get your head around it. You know, even if some of the structure falls within 3 meters, some of the excavation goes within 3 meters, they're notifiable as an adjoining owner. Now, I've done a little update on this slide. As you remember, this is borrowed from the community's booklet. They've got the I think it's the same illustration. So what I've done there is I've put a foundation, and a lot of the foundations now previously have a projection. So it's where the foundation is further, it sits out from the wall. This is standard strip foundation. This is what commonly builders love building. This is how they always like doing it. You talk to them about an eccentric foundation and they don't like it. So that we're actually looking at the distance from that foundation to your edge of your excavation, and if that's 3 meters, and the lower depth is looking at the bottom of their foundation to where you're going, and that's the second test. So just to put more detail on that, on that section, this is the measurement. So where you're measuring, and you're looking at from here to the wall, it's 2.9 meters. I've had a question come in and say it's 2.9 meters. What you're actually doing is you've got to assume there's going to be a 50 mil nib there, so that in fact it's probably not going to be 2.9 meters. It's probably going to be 2.85 or something. So if in doubt, notify. And I've gotten relating to that, I've put in a plan view. So that's our house we're going to build an extension on. That's the neighboring house, and because these are a semi, there's another detached house around a little bit further away, and you'll notice they're stepped, they're not in line. And if that's a proposed extension under Section 6.1, we're obviously within 3 meters of this edge. This is the existing foundation, assuming these are old buildings and pre-76 and they don't have deep foundations. The other distance to watch out for is because we're going to be excavating there, it's from this edge there to the edge of their foundation, and if that's 3 meters, they're also notifiable. And just to remind everybody, you've got line of junction 1 notice, which is where you're building, although there's a little gap there, it's where you're building right on the line of junction. And let me just refresh everyone's memory on line of junction versus the boundary. So the boundary is a 3-dimensional plane. It's actually everything from the ground to the top of the sky to the bottom of the earth, center of the earth. And if you dig up and you find anything on there is yours, apart from minerals, because the government has rights to the mineral. If you find rubbish, that's yours. So you own everything that's in the ground. And this is where we're getting air rights nowadays. Everyone's talking about air rights in terms of building above their building. So this is where the term air rights comes from. That's the boundary. Now, a line of junction is a point where those two lands meet. So you need to be aware of line of junction, definition of a line of junction. Now, just to reiterate, party wall surveyors are not allowed to decide the boundary. That comes under a boundary dispute resolution procedure, and that's quite complex at the moment, the boundary laws. So, and I'm just going to go through converting garages, and I think the chaps that did this drawing, Telway, might actually be on the web, and I saw a quick shout out to Telway This is one of their projects that they did. So they're doing this is the existing garage. They're soundproofing the wall, so that's noticed there. Because if we look at their building, it was a shared common party wall there. They're soundproofing this inner wall, they're converting the garage into something that can be used as an adaptation. They're increasing the insulation and soundproofing of this wall to meet regulations. They're also, what they're actually doing is extending the party wall there. So they're raising the party wall. And I believe there was some sort of underpinning there to ensure that the new beefed up roof, the garage could handle the new beefed up roof, because A, the building regulations have changed, and B, there's more loading on it. So that's just to remind everybody of that. Back to you, Paul. I think there's some more questions coming in.
Yeah. So there was a few that were similar, so I'll just ask one of them in that case. I think the first one we did touch on Tuesday. So it was adapting flats where potentially removing load-bearing walls and putting steels in. Where do they stand in terms of party walls when it's a flat and floors and ceilings?
Oh, okay, great question. And Tuesday onwards, I'm going to be doing a question time, half an hour webinar each Tuesday. So where you're doing a flat conversion, i.e. you're taking a wall out. So just to address the party wall, you're going to be cutting into the party wall. So you have to notify the neighbor, and it depends where your steel's resting. If you're not cutting into the structure, and again, it would depend on the lease, where the demise of your lease is. So I'm just looking at the ceiling there. So if you're going to be able to see the steel, and the steel is resting below the ceiling, as you get the old conversions, old steel beams, and you're doing effectively a through lounge, you'd have to notify the neighbors, but you probably wouldn't have to notify the upstairs flat, because their demise starts from middle of the joist. So okay. The joist is, if you like, the party wall bit, and because you're not cutting into it, they're actually not notifiable owners. It might be an idea to ask them if they want to do a schedule of condition just to protect both sides, but in most cases, the upstairs flat aren't notifiable. Now, the other 2 points to note where you're doing flat work, and it doesn't fall under the Party Wall Act, is A, you're going to need freeholders' consent. So make sure when you get the freeholders' consent, you can also include party wall consent within that freeholders' consent. So it saves you having to do a party wall award. I've seen some flat extensions where they're extending a ground floor flat, and the freeholders own the whole block. They've given consent subject to a party wall award. Strictly speaking, that's not correct, but it's easier just to carry it out, because otherwise they're not going to give you consent. So that's a freeholder within that building. Now, on the side where you're putting the steel, if you're inserting it into a party wall, you're probably going to get the freeholder and adjoining owner as notifiable owners. And if you've got it on both sides, you're going to have them on both sides. Does that answer the question, Paul?
Yes, yeah, I think so. Yes.
Great question.
A couple of people have asked where you need to serve notices on multiple sections of the Act. Can you do this on the same notice? And what happens if one's consented to and one isn't?
Yeah, good question. So the way it's set out in the booklet we've drafted, you've got separate notice for section 1, section 6, separate notice for section 2, 3. They're separate pieces of paper, and we usually write a cover letter. You'll see it in there. We're only actually asking for one response. So in effect, they can't consent to one notice and not consent to the other. It's an all or nothing reply. So either they're consenting to all the works, or although the term used is dissent, they can't actually stop you doing works. It's all they can do is appoint a surveyor, or appoint surveyors that will then determine the time and manner of the works. That they're not allowed to refuse you. Excuse me. They're not actually allowed to refuse you they're not actually they're not actually giving you permission as such. They're just dissenting so that they can appoint a surveyor who can look at the works and work out the time and manner in which to do those.
Okay, so I think that answers the next question. When so if a neighbour refuses to allow you to install new joists into a party wall, presumably that they can't refuse it, they have to appoint a surveyor to.
Yeah, so they appoint a surveyor that will determine the time and manner. And to tell you the truth, I've only come across 2 scenarios where the building owners haven't been able to do the works that they intended. One was a case of where it didn't make enough sense for the cost. And this was quite a complex setup where we had joists running across. There was a roof that was shared, and the ridge beam, instead of running left to right, was running back and forth. And because of the costs involved with doing it, it just didn't make sense. So they revised the scheme. The other scenario I've come across, and this I think you need to be aware of, where they were refurbishing a flat, a house. They wanted to remove the chimney so they can fit a nicer kitchen in. They'd already ordered the kitchen. Now on the other side of that chimney, the adjoining owner's chimney had asbestos in there. So, and they were quite reasonable, but they were saying was give us enough time because the parents were elderly. They're going to be moving out in a year or so. Give us time, and then you can have access, because you couldn't effectively remove that chimney without guaranteeing asbestos health and safety impact for the neighbours. So there are occasions where you may not be able to do exactly what you want, but 99.9% the Act is there to enable works to take place and not to stop them. So okay. In that scenario, they'd have to revise their schemes.
Great. A couple of questions about timing. So how far in advance can you agree an award, and does it lapse after a certain period of time?
So generally speaking, awards are for 12 months, 1 year period. You can have longer awards if you can persuade the surveyors to agree to it. So it can be for longer than 12 months. The other thing to watch here is the schedule of condition might go out of date, in terms of, if you imagine you agree an award, say we agree it now, we're intending to carry out the works, we've got a COVID lockdown and this delays the works, we're going to go on to next year. And there could be changes in the adjoining owner's property. Now, the other thing to watch out for here is where you've agreed an award, so you're a building owner, you've got the adjoining owners, and the adjoining owners sell up and there's new owners there. So in that case, because the owners the award is a legal agreement between the 2 owners, and this owner changes, that award is no longer effective if the notifiable works haven't been done. So the awards need to be revised. But that's not as difficult as it sounds, because part of the process of conveyancing, they should have been given this award. And then if you're simply going through it again, they're aware of the scheme. They might appoint their own surveyors. Usually they'll end up appointing the same surveyors, and it's a rerun. So that's the other thing to be aware of in that scenario.
There were a couple of questions around the enclosure costs, and I guess if you're the second neighbour and the first neighbour wants too much for the enclosure costs, can you just kind of build your own wall, kind of, I suppose, to your side of the party wall to avoid that?
Yeah, you can build your own wall, but if the neighbour wants too much, you can take it to the surveyor to determine the costs, and they're worked out. It would usually, it wouldn't make sense to build your own structure, because the surveyors, either they'll work it out on a book rate, and although that will be more expensive than normal, it would still be cheaper than building your own, and B, you'd gain the space. So if the adjoining owner is now adjoining owner, the owners who built the structure, and don't forget, it's when they build a new structure. So where you've got a wall that already exists, that the adjoining owners can't specify that as enclosure costs. So in terms of man-side roofs and so forth.
Yeah.
So just to recap, it's not the adjoining owners that are putting the cost. This is worked out by a surveyor. So they'll take the cost as it currently, book rate as it currently exists now. And it's half the area that you're enclosing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Let's have a look. There's a couple of particular scenarios. Somebody's asked about party wall notice if you're doing resin paving that involves laying concrete in the front garden. I would have thought that would be lower, would it? So I would have thought,
yeah, I don't think you're excavating lower. And, I don't know what sort of resin paving they're putting in there. It must be.
Unless you're going down a long way, probably not.
Yeah, even the old Victorian houses, although they haven't got much foundation, they're sort of 2 or 3 bricks down. So
yeah, yeah.
I doubt very much. Well, you could be creating a sunken garden, in which case.
I guess so. There were a couple around party wall surveyors in particular. So is there a list anywhere of kind of indicative costs of indicative surveyor costs, or how much you're likely to be charged?
Yeah, as an adjoining owner, I'm guessing they mean adjoining. So for a building owner, they'll send you a quote. You can have a fixed fee or an hourly rate. So if you're appointing a building owner surveyor, they'll give you a quote, and they should do. Right.
Okay.
On the adjoining owner side, because it's a statutory appointment, there's no real quote format. And I'm not going to quote a figure because it all depends on where it is.
Okay.
But for simple residential works, if the adjoining owners, and usually the industry is on a timesheet basis, there are guidance for simple residential works. It should be between 6 to 10 hours, somewhere between there, and then you get an hourly rate, and it's got to be reasonable cost. So if the adjoining owner surveyor is asking for too much cost, and this is the biggest bugbear of the industry at the moment, you have an option of taking it to the third surveyor. So there's this gray area where it's not worth taking to the third surveyor. It's, they won't challenge it. But your surveyor should give you a heads up of what there are. Once the award's agreed, the cost of the adjoining owner surveyor is the last item. And your surveyor should say, this is what's being asked for. Do you want me to challenge it? Or it's reasonable, there's no point challenging it. We're not going to win. Or there's a 50% chance. So that's what happens with the adjoining owner surveyor's costs.
Okay.
So
somebody else was asking about the third surveyor, whether they need to be made aware of their appointment before they're named.
No, not anymore. It used to be the case that you'd send a letter out and they'd have a stack of letters saying you've been appointed third surveyor. Not anymore. The important thing is when they're selected that you have it in writing between the two of you, between the two surveyors, and nowadays an email's fine.
Great. There are a couple of questions about what if there is some damage, what if the damage is a little bit later, but in any case, what's the process if there is some damage occurs after the works are completed?
Yeah, so awards stay live in perpetuity, so it doesn't matter when it's 6 years from the discovery of damage, and that's a common law right. So if it's 6 years from the point of discovery, if there's damage, again, it's the current owners that will be responsible for the works that have been previously carried out. Now, it could be that the damage is insignificant and the current owners will just have to bear it. So an example of this is where you've got cupboards next door and you're doing a loft conversion. When we go and do the survey, all we see is cupboards. Even when we open them up, they've got backing, so we can't we do open up cupboards, and if there's cracking behind it, we'll obviously note that down. But when we can't see it, it's only when you find out that the cupboards are removed, and in that case, the building owner, the owners of the building that had the works done would be liable for that. And so then you've got the damage settlement procedure in that the adjoining owner puts a figure to the building owner, and it's for the building owner to say, well, is it worth me just settling it? Or is it, should I get a surveyor involved to assess the likelihood of the damage? And it's up to the adjoining owner to say whether he wants the damage fixed or he wants compensation. It's not the building owner's decision. He can't say, I'll send my mate down, he'll paint it for
Okay.
you.
There were a few questions about kind of de minimis things on the party wall. Is there a particular description of what that would be? It's kind of things like electrical sockets.
Yeah. So the Red New White Book talks about this, and it's all about it. De minimis means no impact, so it can depend on the structure of the wall. So, as I said on Tuesday, if you've got a half brick or a 4-inch wall that's, you know, not current standards, and where you've got a half brick wall, and you're putting a socket in, so you've got 112 mil, and your socket's one of these deeper ones that are there for dimmer switches. You obviously, and that's about 47 mil. You're going to end up cutting out half the wall off. So it all depends on the structure of the wall, the works you're doing. Generally, if you're putting in screws for shelving, that's known as the de minimis, and I'm guessing they're assuming that the wall is a full brick wall in terms it's 225 rather than 112. But sockets can be notifiable works in that if you've got a very thin wall and you're cutting away half of it, you can have impact on the other side. So it's one of these tests that are relative. See what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if the your kind of next door neighbour starts to do things to the party wall and they're not aware of Party Wall Act and don't do anything? What should you do as the next door neighbour?
They start to do works and they won't engage with you.
Yes, and then they haven't issued any sort of notice.
Right. So the act is slightly weak here. It's not retrospectively enforceable. The only thing you can really do is get a solicitor to write them a letter and then go for an injunction. That's the only thing that they've put in there. Now, obviously, if there's damage, you've still got rights to common law saying, you know, this is damage, but and where the building owners carried out works and they haven't followed the process, this looks upon quite badly for the building owner by the judge.
Is there any case law on disputes or outcomes? Have any of these been taken to court in any way?
Loads. For there's barristers who specialise in it, and two of the barristers are Stuart Frame and Nick Isaacs. So they're actually both in Tenfield Chambers. So if you go, I've just got a new case that's occurred in April 2020, just before the webinar. I haven't read through it. So there's always case law developing on this, and this is some of the ramifications that we get. And that's why the understanding and the application is changing as we're going through.
Yeah. Can a leaseholder serve a notice without the freeholder's permission or them being aware?
Well, they can, but don't forget the other bit of the law that impacts them is the freeholder's consent. So yes, they can serve a notice because they're leaseholders. They'll be on the land registry. They're an owner that's desiring to do the works. It's not always a good idea, because if you're serving a notice and the adjoining owners appoint a surveyor and the freeholder doesn't give you consent, those surveyors can technically, adjoining owner surveyors can then actually bill you because they've become engaged and they've got involved in the process, they've spent time on it, and you haven't obtained freeholder's consent, the project doesn't go through.
Yeah.
So, you know, you could end up facing a bill from the adjoining owner surveyors in those scenarios.
A couple of questions on how you know the depth of your neighbour's foundations. think, did you say 1976 was a good indication that?
Yeah. It's the heat wave of 76. So, and usually in the 80s, the buildings are lower. So anything built before 76 will probably have shallow foundation. Anything built post 80s will be quite deep. The other way to do it is if the building's a similar age and if you can dig a trial hole in your own building, that'll give you an indication. Although I've had scenarios where there's post 80s houses and because of the slope of the road and their foundations are going to be that depth, but they're still going to end up going lower, so it still becomes notifiable. So okay. That's a good test. And the other one is to see if you can find some plans on it. And the final one is, if in doubt, you serve the notice anyway.
Okay. There's a couple of questions that I didn't entirely understand, so I'll read them to you, see if they make more sense to you. Yeah. So if the two parties are in dispute ahead of the works, but the works are no longer proceeding, is the building owner still committed to the dispute process?
Yeah, that's the proper barristers and lawyers. Okay. So if the works aren't going ahead, there's no dispute. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the end of that dispute. But the other dispute, and this is quite questionable, and I've had a scenario here, becomes the costs of the surveyors. And that's a very intricate question. So once you've got this going on, if the adjoining owner surveyor is asking for some costs and the building owner is saying, well, we haven't done the works, we've stopped the works because of X, Y, Z, how can you be liable for the costs? And it's got to be reasonable cost to that point or works they've done. So it could be a case that they're virtually ready to do the award and the award's ready to be signed off. Those costs will be different. Yeah. Whereas if all the adjoining owner surveyor's done is get a letter of appointment and they want a substantial cost for that, you know, and this is where if it's important to select the third surveyor really, really quickly. Otherwise, you can't challenge the costs being asked for from the adjoining owner surveyor. So I'm guessing what they're talking about here is the costs of the surveyors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. So there's one from I think it's a technical officer from a home improvement agency talking about if they get involved or kind of whether it's worth them getting involved, I guess, as one of the surveyors in the dispute process, or to leave it to an external surveyor. And I think kind of from my experience, it's probably worth getting an independent surveyor in so that you're not conflicted in any way.
Yeah, so, you know, and also it's a case of, although it sounds quite simple, issue a notice to an award, yeah, it's all easy. It's when the proverbial hits the fan, if you like,
yes,
that you think, what the hell do I do here? Or it's sometimes the case that, you know, the other surveyor is going to try and pull one over you, basically.
Yes.
Of course, then we never do that.
Yes. That there's quite a few people want your booklet, but they say they're not on LinkedIn. Is there any other way to get a copy?
If they send me an email, I'm quite happy to email it to.
Okay.
Yeah. So while we're going, I'm running a question time. I'm going to put this on if you don't mind. From next Tuesday, I thought I'd do a little question time. Oops. Overdone it. Here we go. Oh, you can see our face. So I'm going to put this little screen on that shows our question time, and that's on Tuesdays. Let me put a slide on. So that's on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. So.
Yeah.
You'll get an email, register for that, and we'll go through all the questions. Sorry, yeah, there's my email. If you type me a little email, happy to send it out as an email. Again, when I said, okay, so you should be able to see the screen there now.
Yes, yeah.
So if you send me an email, more than happy to send it out as an email attachment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you're not on LinkedIn, it's worth joining just to get all the guys that Dil's already put on there, because there's quite a lot of stuff on there, isn't there? If you kind of want to refer to it without going through the video again.
Yeah, I was actually writing a series of articles, and I got distracted with something, and COVID came along. But I'm going to go and finish that serial now. And I think I was at number 6 when you picked up on it.
Yes.
6 or 10.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of the questions, I think. Just as we approach our pass race, that worked perfectly.
Brilliant, Paul. Thank you for your time. Thank you for organising this. And like I said, send in the questions. I haven't quite worked out where I want the questions to go. So at the moment, it's either LinkedIn or email. So I might have to set up a dedicated email address for the questions. But the questions are very interesting. If I haven't answered your question, I'm going to do the question time. It's only going to be a half an hour Zoom, but I might actually get people to come on and voice the questions and have a little discussion.
Yeah.
Try and make it as interesting and as interactive as possible. Paul, thank you for organising this. It's hopefully it was of value to you. Keep your topics coming in and your audience.
Yeah, thank you, Gil. It's been very interesting. So thank you for your time and expertise. It's been much appreciated.
Right. Thank you very much, and happy to do another one at some point.
Great.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Take care. Have a great weekend. And before I go, just like to say thank you to the NHS for always looking after us, not just in these times of need.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.